Pardon? Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We have just come from a meeting of the Greater Manchester Police, Fire and Crime panel, where I'm pleased to say members of the panel have endorsed our recommendation, the recommendation made by the Deputy Mayor and I for the new Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. So today is a positive day for the force, and we move forward into a new era. We are confident that we have found the right person to lead Greater Manchester Police into that new era. Stephen Watson has been Chief Constable of South Yorkshire Police for 5 years. When he arrived in South Yorkshire, the force was at a low ebb. It required improvement pretty much across the board, and 5 years on, it is one of, if not the most improved police force in the country, rating good across most of its standards, but particularly on one, and this was persuasive for the Deputy Mayor and I in making our decision. They are rated as outstanding when it comes to ethics and culture within the force. And that is, of course, something that we would like to see here in Greater Manchester. So we move forward into this new era, and I think all three of us share a determination for it to be an era defined by positivity, not defeatism nor defensiveness, where our police force, the many thousands of brilliant people who work within it, really show our communities what they do and deliver what our communities want, which is firm but fair policing, with victims at the heart of everything that Greater Manchester Police does, and really embedded and in touch with all of our communities. So, Stephen, on behalf of the Deputy Mayor and myself, but indeed all of the Greater Manchester family, we are delighted to welcome you here as our new Chief Constable. And rather than hearing at length from us today, we want our colleagues in the media, but more importantly, the Greater Manchester public, to hear from you. So I'll hand over the stage to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm very grateful to you for your kind comments and to your support and the support of the Deputy Mayor and, of course, the Police and Crime panel, who have happily endorsed the choice that you have made. I guess all that I would wish to say is that it is, of course, humbling to be entrusted with the great responsibility and the great privilege of being asked to lead a great force, such is Greater Manchester Police. I think the point that I would speak to first is to reiterate the point that whereas the force has challenges, it is underperforming its latent potential, and there are improvements that have to be made and will be made rapidly. That is not to say that G&P is a failing force. It is a force that is comprised of many thousands of genuinely hardworking, committed, brave, talented professional people, many of whom on a daily basis do the sort of things that the rest of us perhaps wouldn't do or couldn't do. And part of my job is to support those people in their mission, which is to make life better for those who we serve. I have great faith that this is a job that can be done. It is not, of course, just about me. It is about teamwork, and it is about the recognition that there is palpable and immense potential in G&P. My privileged job will be to take that momentum and to turn it into something positive. Of that, I'm convinced we can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. Bev, I wonder if you would just like to respond to what the new Chief Constable has said.
I would indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Stephen, we're absolutely thrilled and delighted to have you join us. Not only because of the experience that you're bringing, which is both substantial and really highly relevant to what we need in Greater Manchester, and the Mayor has outlined some of that. But actually, what just came through then, I think, and also through the recruitment process and just now at the Police and Crime panel, for the person you are, for the values that you're bringing to this job, for your focus on the crucial resource through which you'll make the necessary changes, which is the people in Greater Manchester Police. And we welcome the fact that you're bringing that approach. We think it's the right approach. You've talked, not just, but previously you've talked to us about organisational justice, and we're beginning to understand what you mean by that. And certainly that is a focus, an approach that we think is not only welcome, it will be very powerful and very well received by the people who work for Greater Manchester Police. But above all, it's your commitment not just to our staff, our officers, but to people who live here, the people that we serve through our services. And there is nothing more important to people than their own safety and security, and the role that the police have in ensuring that and working with partners to make sure that the experience our residents have wherever they're living in Greater Manchester is the best that it can be. And we all three here, with all of our partners in Greater Manchester, share that commitment. So we really look forward to working with you. It is the beginning of a new era. I feel very, very positive about it and excited about the change we can bring about. And I know you, like me, can't wait to get started. So welcome. I'll stop now. And I think handing over to Councillor Murphy, who, as the chair of the Police and Crime panel, wants to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev, and congratulations, Stephen. We've just had a full panel hearing to confirm your appointment, and it was really pleasing that there was a unanimous vote to approve your appointment. That was across independent members, across all political parties. And what was very clear was a panel, we wanted to see somebody who had the drive and commitment to improve forces, improve the police force, but also have a vision for what Greater Manchester can be and how it can be improved. And as I say, the unanimous decision of that panel was to endorse your appointment. So on behalf of the 10 districts in Greater Manchester, the independent members who sit on the panel, congratulations, and we look forward to working with you in the weeks, months and years ahead.
Thank you very much indeed, Nigel, and thank you to you and all of the panel for the way this afternoon's session was conducted. I'll now turn to our colleagues in the media, and I'll take everybody one by one. So first of all, to ITV Granada and to Rob Smith. Rob. Could unmute and ask your question again.
We'll try that a second time. We did try it the first time, but we'll try it again. Good afternoon, Chief Constable. You say GMP is not a failing force, but inspectors found that it had failed thousands of victims of crime. How does one new person in charge change that? Why do you think you can change that?
When I say GMP is not a failing force, that is in no way to ignore the fact that there are some significant challenges that confront the organisation. The reason why I choose not to speak of the entire force being a failure, however, is because that is simply not true of much of what is achieved on a day-to-day basis and much of what our great people do on a day-to-day basis. And it is an odd form of leadership to describe over 10,000 people as failures if you are to motivate in a way that I think is entirely possible. However, there is something in the structure, the systems and the processes that are absolutely getting in the way of our people's ability to really turn out the sort of performance that the public have a right to expect. I know there is a culpable energy amongst the force to turn that around and to make sure that the force starts to perform in a way that actually does justice to their daily endeavours. My role in this is to focus on those things that enable that to happen. I have a track record of doing that. I have a very clear prospectus in terms of how it might practically be done. I know that it is not something I have to do on my own. It is something I will be assisted with, both within and without the force. And knowing the quality of the people that we have, I think the transition from where we are now to where we need to get can happen perhaps more quickly than might be anticipated.
Thank you, Stephen. Rob, did you want to come back, or is that okay? Can I now turn to Kelly Forum from BBC Northwest Tonight? Kelly.
Hello, I was just unmuting. There we go. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, Mr. Watson, to Greater Manchester. Just a question for the Mayor, just going back to Ian Hopkins' resignation. Can you confirm to us, did he leave early because of an illness, because of his ear infection, or did you personally force his hand?
I decided it was time for new leadership in the force. So I asked the former Chief Constable to step aside and bring in the new era that very much starts in earnest today. I did say at the time that there were many good things that had happened in Greater Manchester Police over recent times, the extra recruitment that we've seen. In the last 4 years, we've recruited almost 700 new police officers to the front line in Greater Manchester Police. They are a much better reflection of the communities of Greater Manchester, and that was to the former Chief Constable's credit. And of course, with all of the challenges that we faced in the aftermath of the Arena attack, the reassurance given to communities, the support for bereaved families was outstanding. But on other issues, we did not see the progress that we needed to see. Much comment has been made about the IOPS system, which isn't completely failing, but isn't where it should be at this stage. And that wasn't good enough. Of course, we then had the HMIC report. It's important for me to say, if you look back to 2010, this was a police force hit by severe cuts that significantly weakened its capability and its performance. It then had to contend with the Arena and everything that came with it, and then it had to go through the change to its IT systems. That was a lot for it to contend with, but it's not to make any excuses. We needed to see better. The communities of Greater Manchester deserved better. That is why it was time for new leadership, and that new leadership is now here, and we move today into a new chapter. Kelly, would you like to ask a follow-up, or is that okay? I think we better move on to the next question. So could I now call John Shearhout from the Manchester Evening News? John.
Yes, thank you for having me. Congratulations to Mr. Watson for his being installed as the new Chief Constable. I have a question for him. He's got quite a job in his hands, I think we'd all accept. And we know quite a bit about your professional record, and particularly that you've got form for turning around failing police forces. But can you tell us something about you and your personality? What made you become a police officer in the first place? What makes you tick?
What made me become a police officer was because one searches in one's life for something that's going to make a difference, and what makes me tick, frankly, is the outcome of public service, and policing is one of those very definite ways in which the product of your labours is very much to the benefit of others. And I don't wish to sound like a saint, but it is something that actually really does make me tick. I think that the policing mission is of central importance. I think effective policing done well makes a tremendous difference to people's ability to go about their daily lives safe in the knowledge that they and their families will not be put upon by criminals. I think it important that, as the Deputy Mayor has just said, people's safety and security is really precious to them. And to be able to provide that, to be able to put criminals on the back foot, to be able to intervene where vulnerability becomes manifest, to be able to work with others, such as to break the cycle where sometimes within families, one generation bequeaths to the next a pretty miserable life of criminality, whilst similarly affecting everybody else. These are the things that make me tick as an individual. These are the things that I find align very closely with my personal values. I think policing is an honourable calling, and I have had the privilege over many years now to work with some of the most brilliant people in any walk of life, and to be able to lead a big team of brilliant people is just something very special. It's an honour, it's a privilege, and it's something I'm very lucky to do.
John, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Well, if I'm allowed a supplementary, yes. I think everybody accepts that Greater Manchester Police has been brilliant over the years. It's investigating major crime. You only have to look at the investigation into Manchester Arena to know that. But we constantly get complaints at the Manchester Evening News from people who say they've had poor service or no service at all from the police when they come to report relatively minor matters like burglary or theft. What do you say to people like that?
The first thing that I would say to that, John, is, and acknowledging that possibly you didn't mean it in this way, but I absolutely do not think that things like burglary are minor issues. I think they're really significant, serious issues. You're absolutely right to point to the fact that there is a lot that GMP does that is fantastic, and there is much within the capability of the force, which is the envy of many other organisations that do not have the full spectrum ability, experience and capability of GMP. At the level of burglary, vehicle crime, assaults, abuse, there are far, far too many examples currently where satisfaction is not brought to the victim. Our outcomes are too low and they need to improve. Of course, it is no secret that one of HMIC's most telling recommendations surrounded the fact that we are not yet recording all crimes that are reported to us. We also know that not everybody who is victim of crime reports it to us. That is really important to sort it out, because if we don't record all crime, we don't know what's going on. Criminals are getting away with it. We cannot intervene where people are vulnerable. So all of these things are hugely important, and they are areas where improvement has to be obtained. I don't personally think that it is good enough to identify certain crime categories, even when there are so-called solvability factors where we have a sense of who might have done it, to determine that that is somehow unimportant and therefore cannot be pursued. My commitment is that all crime reported to GMP will be faithfully recorded, properly investigated, and concluded to the satisfaction of the victim. And where victims are vulnerable, they will be safeguarded. And even when we cannot bring a criminal to book, we should always leave the victim with a very clear perception that we have done our best in every circumstance. It is possible to do that, and that is my commitment in terms of our systems, structures, processes. Every crime reported to GMP will be properly investigated, and where we can bring people to book, we will do that. It's going to take some doing, but I think that's the least public can expect of us.
I think you've just heard, John, why we asked Stephen to be the new Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. But thank you for your questions, and we'll move on, if we can, to Pat Hurst from the Press Association. Pat.
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Watson. This is one for the Mayor or Deputy Mayor. Is it right that Mr. Hopkins, having resigned and the circumstances of his resignation, he's still going to be given a substantial severance package? And how much is it?
So on that, Pat, all I can say to you today is that there is not a final resolution of all of those matters, and they will be laid out in due course, but that day is not today. Ask a follow-up question.
Well, hopefully that information will be made public. But my follow-up question is for the new Chief Constable. Given the HMIC report, what do you think went wrong at GMP, and what's your number one priority in terms of how you're going to fix things?
Well, I hope I've emphasised the fact that not everything in GMP is wrong, but there are very significant issues where the way that we have operated and the service that we've provided to victims, and particularly vulnerable victims, is at best subpar and at worst non-existent, which cannot ever be acceptable. I think, frankly, there has been a lot of talk, and I make no judgment in this regard because things have been tough in terms of cuts and the staff reductions that have been necessitated as a result. But I think there has been a lot of talk about what cannot be done and what we don't have and how difficult things are for the police. And I suspect that that has seeped into the organisation's culture and mindset. And that is not to say that blind optimism will carry you forward. But my approach would be a very much more positive one than that. GMP is an immensely powerful force for good. If the entire force pulls on the same end of the same piece of rope in the same direction consistently, it is an unbeatable force for good. And I know that the calibre, the character and the quality of the people that we have makes that a perfectly reasonable aspiration. And so I think there is something about mindset, there's certainly something about structure, systems, processes, there is something about strengthening leadership, and there is, on top of all of that, harnessing the latent potential of the thousands of brilliant men and women who already work for the organisation.
Thank you, Stephen. So we now turn to Michael Gaffney from LBC. Michael.
Andy, hi. Today, as you said, is about this new dawn for GMP. I just want to ask about the cost of that, picking up a bit off what Pat said there. You've spent £250,000 sending in consultants to the force, nearly 20,000 spent on recruiters for this role you're filling today. As Pat mentioned, still the issue of the former Chief Constable's remuneration. Then there's all the costs involved with IOPS, which still doesn't work and has cost £27 million and counting. So what I want to know is, have you got an overall figure for what you think getting GMP fixed is going to cost in the end? And when you've got other local services being cut and council tax bills going up, how do you justify that to the electorate?
We are in ongoing talks with the contractors to IOPS, and significant sums of money have been returned to the public purse as a result of some of the failure to deliver. So the figures you've quoted, Michael, are not correct. I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to pick up on the other elements of the support. But if you look at any police force in the country, Michael, they are spending money on getting IT systems right. That has to be done. And bringing in the best support where they need it. This is one of the country's largest police forces. It needs every support that we can provide to it. And as I said to you before, the funding is going into the front line of Greater Manchester Police, because we've recruited 700 extra police officers since both I and the Deputy Mayor came into office. This year, or the coming financial year, 325 more. So we continue to make sure the money gets to that front line. But of course, we have to do what is right to get GMP where it needs to be. But it's not the case that we don't take a tough approach to safeguarding the public's money, as we have done with the contractors of the IOPS system. I don't know whether the Deputy Mayor would like to add to that.
Thank you. I'll just make 2 points. Firstly, the budget for the whole IOP system was set by our predecessor, and we're broadly within the parameters of what was envisaged. And secondly, the point I'd make is also that, it's quite easy to come out and spout figures, some of which actually I don't recognise, Michael, there. But in order to try and make progress, it actually makes economic sense to bring in people who know what they're doing and who can advise on how the system needs to change. That is the most efficient and effective way of doing that, bringing in people who can provide that expertise when we haven't got that expertise in-house. And I suspect that had that happened earlier, we might have avoided some of the problems. But, we are, and GMP are doing their best. We're determined to resolve this issue. It is not actually the whole IOP system that is a problem. Most of the elements are actually not only working, there are huge improvements. Our officers now have mobile technology that they can take with them that is transformational in terms of doing their job. There is one element, which is the police works, which is the problem, and we're determined to get that fixed. But as a whole, it is not a failing system.
And just to make sure I got the point over, Michael, we've secured rebates worth millions. So we will come back to you with figures when the time is right. But obviously these are issues that are still in progress, and there will be issues for our new Chief Constable to resolve in due course. Would you like to ask a follow-up question?
If I could ask Stephen a question as well, and congratulations, Stephen. One of the things that the Mayor has highlighted in recruiting you is addressing the culture in GMP. And certainly one of the problems in recent years has been how the force seems to lose senior officers under clouds. We could name the likes of Steve Haywood, Rebecca Sutcliffe, who've disappeared under unfortunate circumstances. What do you think's been going wrong in the organisation that the force's top people's careers have seemingly derailed so often? And what are you going to do to fix that?
Michael, I don't want to comment on past issues with senior people. All I can talk to is my own approach, my own expectations. And frankly, my view is that when I emphasize the importance of values and values being central to the way in which the organisation needs to operate, those values have to be triply amplified in the character of our leaders. And frankly, the further up the greasy pole you go, the more that those values need to be evidenced in your personal conduct. And I do take a very clear view that in terms of conduct of our people, I want to see all of our people operating with professionalism, with dignity, and in line with our values. And the more senior you are, the more stringent the expectation is. I will always try to live the values that I expect to see in others. And where those values are not evidenced, then people, I'm afraid, will fall out with the GMP that I'm going to lead.
Thank you, Michael. Could I now turn to Chloe Livadeus from Police Oracle? Chloe.
Good afternoon. My question is for Chief Constable Watson. The Home Office said this month that its reform of police and crime commissioners, which Mr. Burnham acts as, will clarify the role and responsibilities of PCCs and their chief constables. As we enter this new era for GMP, are the lines clear enough between the Mayor and the Chief Constable's jurisdictions, or would you welcome more clarity on your operational responsibilities and independence?
Well, I think the fact that a review has been entered into perhaps indicates that the lines are not always as clear as they could be, but I don't necessarily think that that is typical of any one set of relationships. I think there are different relationships in different parts of the country. But what I do think is clear, and notwithstanding any further clarity that might at some point emerge from the review, what is clear is there is a constitutional difference between the roles. Those constitutional differences are set out in the legislation. They are set out in the policing protocol. I think it is incumbent on all parties to that relationship to safeguard and uphold the difference between the roles, because I do think that all people of goodwill understand why the constitutional differences are important. Upholding the operational independence of the Chief Constable, I think, is an important principle in our constitutional life. But I do not feel that there is so little clarity in the current arrangements that you cannot achieve a perfectly harmonious, productive, healthy, supportive and challenging relationship all at the same time. That is something I've certainly enjoyed in South Yorkshire. It is something that I have every confidence I will enjoy here too, and I have no concern that any lack of clarity means that we cannot operate in the excellent way that is perfectly possible, providing we all commit to what it is that we're about. And I have no indication that it will be any other way.
Absolutely. Chloe, would you like to follow up?
Yes, please. Another question around, we talked a lot about regaining public confidence, but I was wondering, how do you plan to regain the confidence of your officers and staff, who we all know have had an incredibly difficult year?
Well, they have had a difficult year, and frankly, I think there are a lot of them who are fed up. Too many of them are fed up of life in GMP, to the extent where too many of them, given half a chance, would transfer to other forces. That is something I'm absolutely determined to stop. And the approach that I will be taking is one to reinstill a sense of pride, and that pride will come from many quarters. Predominantly, it will come from the improving performance of the force in satisfying the demands of the communities that we serve. There is something about winning that makes people feel good. And so we're going to drive toward that. But we're also going to drive to improved leadership standards. We're going to strive to looking smarter. We're going to strive to doing better in all that we seek to achieve. And we're going through that pride to understand that this is a brilliant organisation to belong to, that has many opportunities available to people that are simply not available in other organisations. And I'm really, really determined that people feel that positive pride of being able to cope professionally in challenging circumstances. And I guess in addition to all of that, I will have a really clear-eyed focus to all of those tiny little things that might otherwise be described as hindrance factors, the things that get in people's way. It seems to me that one of the practical, tactical, useful jobs of a chief is to just take the pebble out of our people's shoes. And if you can do that, it's amazing the transformation that can come.
Thank you very much, Chloe. And finally, Tom Dambach from Hits Radio. Tom.
Thank you. Yeah, a question, please, for Stephen Watson, and congratulations on the role. You obviously spent a number of years at South Yorkshire Police. What targets are you working towards in terms of turning things around at the force? Are we talking months or years?
I think we have a big job on our hands, and I think it will take some time. What I am not, however, prepared to wait for, and I am not prepared to ask the public to wait for, is to say, bear with us, and in 3 and 4 years' time, you'll see a noticeable improvement. I think we can bring about a real improvement in people's expectations and experiences of service from GMP really quickly. And in that context, I am thinking more along the lines of weeks and months rather than years. But there will be things that will take a long time to mature. What we need to do is seed the bed now such that those things mature in the right way, that those cultures grow people in the right mould. You know, because we, like every other force, whilst delighted to be taking on so many new staff, do find ourselves with a front line that is getting younger and relatively less experienced than has perhaps been the case in the past. That gives us a wonderful opportunity for the future, but it also gives us some practical challenges for the here and now. And so I guess the short answer is there will be some things that will change within days. There will be things that will change in weeks and months to come. But all of these things collectively will be seeding the future such that a more sustainable, more solid, and more purposeful delivery is enabled for many years to come. And that's really the focus that I would wish to bring to the role whilst I have the privilege of holding it.
Tom, would you like to ask a follow-up?
Yeah, please, just one last one. You're obviously stepping into a pair of shoes. Have you heard or spoken to your predecessor about this new role?
Policing is quite a small family, frankly, at the top, and it should be no surprise to people that I know my predecessor, and my predecessor's communications with me in respect of this job have, I think, on his behalf, been admirably objective and gracious. I know he cares about GMP, and he has wished me well. I have had many conversations with many senior colleagues, and one of the things that is really gratifying is the number of them who are willing to help. There are chief constables up and down the land, many of whom have different skills, talents, bits of their organisation perform in different ways, and all of them are lining up to offer their support. And so I have no shortage of support, wisdom and advice behind me. I'm confident that I join an endeavour which is very much aligned with what the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, wish to achieve too, and really confident that collectively we can push the thing on very purposefully. And I probably would just re-emphasise the point that I think a happier, more productive, more healthy and more proud GMP is very much on the cards. Of that, I am certain.
Thanks very much indeed, Tom, and thank you to all colleagues in the media for your questions this afternoon. I'll just turn again to the Deputy Mayor to see if there's anything that Bev would like to add before we close.
I think only to say that the way that Chief Constable Watson has responded to the questions today, and I think the flavour that he's given of his approach to this job, the values he's bringing, the experience he's had, his commitment to delivering as quickly as possible a better experience for the people of Greater Manchester, I think are very welcome and give you a very clear idea of why he's been appointed. And again, I just repeat, I really look forward to working with him.
Thank you. Thanks, Bev. I just have three things to say in conclusion. The first is to put on record our shared appreciation to the acting Chief Constable, Ian Pilling, who stepped up in difficult circumstances late last year, but has brought stability to Greater Manchester Police and has made improvements, such as the named contactable PC and PCSO, which we introduced in every ward in Greater Manchester, and therefore that's available to every resident of Greater Manchester, and that was brought in earlier this year, as well as beginning to make progress with HMIC on their concerns. And I know I speak for everybody in the Greater Manchester family in expressing our appreciation to Ian for what he's done and the leadership that he's provided over recent months. If I might also add something about governance, because I think this is an opportunity for the Deputy Mayor and I to consider, together with the Chair of the Police, Fire and Crime Panel, what more we can do to strengthen the governance process and the accountability process. I think that there is a need for more accountability to be carried out in public. Over the last few years, obviously the Deputy Mayor and I were doing that day to day with Greater Manchester Police, but sometimes, or often, behind closed doors. I think there is a need for more of that to be done in a public arena. So the commitment I make today, which I've agreed with the new Chief Constable, is that the three of us will appear at least twice a year before elected representatives across Greater Manchester, where we can have an open session, accountability session, perhaps more of the kind that is seen in London. And that is a commitment that we make today to, in this new era, commit to strengthening the accountability process. The final thing I want to say is I think, Chief Constable, we have a start date of late May. Am I right?
Correct.
Good.
24th of May.
The 24th of May. So I just thought it was worth pointing to that at the end. We are very grateful to our friends in South Yorkshire, who we know are disappointed this week. I've spoken to the Mayor of the Sheffield City region, who described our news as a great coup, a good signing for Greater Manchester. And we are also grateful to the Police and Crime Commissioner, Dr. Alan Billings, for the really gracious and supportive way in which he has worked with us and facilitated that start date. So we know Stephen's departure will cause disappointment in the Sheffield City region, but we wish our friends well there and are grateful to them. And I will finish by saying I think we all today will understand their disappointment, because we've seen from our new Chief Constable in almost every single word that he's spoken why he is the new Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police. Everything that he said today will resonate with the public of Greater Manchester. I think you embody, Stephen, what they want to see. And the values that you've spoken of matter to people here. As I said at the beginning, we do want to see firm policing, but we also want to see fair policing that carries our communities with it. And it appears to me that you embody that. Your point about the right behaviours from the very top, I think, is a message that is important for everyone working in Greater Manchester Police to hear. So you couldn't have made a better start than the one you just have. Your formal start obviously will be in a couple of months' time. We all look forward to warmly welcoming you to the Greater Manchester family. But for now, it's congratulations.
Thank you.
And here's to a new era working together. And that concludes today's event, colleagues. Thank you very much for your attendance, and we will close it there. Thank you.